could talk about mental health, working remotely, resilience, and all of those things, or we could talk about last night's interview. But I think it would be it'd be interesting to think about, wouldn't it? But no, we will talk about working remotely and some of the challenges I think that are kind of coming out of work now that we're starting to think about that return to work and what that might look like for us all as well. So please, this morning, as we are going to split it into that kind of 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, but during the first part, if there are questions, if there are thoughts, if there are things that you want to explore further, please just shout, because I'm always happy to do that. I'm just going to share my slides with you now. I hope you can all see that. So who can I see in my, where have you all gone? Can you all see that, Richard? Can you see the slides?
Yeah, that's perfect, Katie. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So our agenda today is we're going to be looking at mental health strategy for working remotely. We're going to talk a bit about etiquette, what it is, why it's important, and how it's really, really fast changing at the moment whilst we're all working remotely, because things are coming up, aren't they, that we haven't even considered before. And then we're going to touch on, to finish off with, thinking about warning signs of distress, things that we should be looking out for in ourselves and also in others as well. So before we dive in too deeply, I just wanted to sort of set the scene by thinking about what has that working remotely actually changed for us. And I've got a few numbers on the screen here, and I would love it if people would give their thoughts on what 48% might refer to, what 12% might refer to, what 52% might refer to, just so that we can set the scene and start thinking about what working remotely is doing to us at the moment. So who wants to have a go at what 48% might mean?
I'd take a guess at saying perhaps it has improved people's mental well-being, mental and physical well-being.
I mean, do you know, it's probably a really, really good guess, and it probably has, absolutely. However, this one, quite sadly, reports the fact that 48% of us admit to having put on weight since we've been working remotely, right? Okay, so it's one thing for us to start to think about, what is this doing to us physically? I was in a team meeting 10 minutes before this session where we were talking about shoulder aches and pains and things like that. Are we set up properly at our desks at the moment? And I know for HR professionals, this is going to be something that we're really going to have to consider, the physical impact of working from home. We've done it, we've worked hard, we've just got on with it for the last year. But what do we need to consider now that we're looking at the fact that agile working is here to stay? And so what do we need to do with that? Okay, good. So 12%, what might 12% be?
I'm just going to share that on the previous 48%, Joss was making the point that could it be working longer hours, which I think is a point worth making anyway, even though it wasn't. And that I like Tom Walker's point about electricity consumption.
Okay, yeah, good. So, okay, let's skip down to the 52% one then, because so this figure comes from the Microsoft report, that they have done a huge report into working from home and working remotely and what it's done to us. And basically, there's been I'm getting an echo. There's been a 52% increase in people being online on Microsoft Teams between 6 p.m. and midnight, 52% increase. So it's absolutely huge. So what we need to actually think about here from an HR perspective is, what is this ability to always being on, always being able to check our emails and working? What is that actually doing to us and our teams? And 12%, it isn't actually something that's changed, but it was a really interesting statistic. There's only 12% of people out there that actually ever want to return to the office full time again. So that 12% is a fascinating figure, because it's not zero. It might be higher or lower than you think, but that's what we're looking at in terms of numbers. Just some interesting numbers to get our conversation flowing today. So on to topic number one. Topic number one is for us to think about how we actually build our sort of mental safety around working from home. So what I wanted to do was show you a little method that I've been thinking about and working on over the last few months. You're going to get all of these slides obviously after today's session, and during the breakout area I'd love it if you could discuss these points in a little bit more detail. But this is the first piece I think that we have to do when we're thinking about our mental health strategy when we're working from home. Step one is to consider what we miss and what we love about working from home. So, example being, I've heard it said quite a few times recently that people are actually missing their commute, right? Not necessarily sitting on a horrible train or anything like that, but they are maybe missing reading a book, listening to a podcast, that space between home and work and that kind of unraveling time that it maybe gave you. So it's really important for us to all consider, first of all, before we do anything about it, what do we actually miss from working in offices and commuting? Then to have a think about what do we love about being at home and working agilely and remotely. And that might be work stuff, that might be personal stuff, but have a think about the relationship between those two things. Once you've done that, you can then start to have a think about readdressing the balance a little bit. So making sure that your balance of what you've lost isn't as high as what you've actually got. So, for example, if you've lost the chance to read on the train or listen to your favourite podcast, how else can you squeeze that into your day? How else can you make sure that you make time for that? And how can you give yourself back something in a slightly different way for our mental health, for our resilience, and for our happiness? So think about readdressing that balance, and that's going to mean something different to absolutely everybody. The third stage that I want us to think about when we're thinking about our mental health strategy when we're working from home, and again, we can do this ourselves or we can share this with others to do as well, is to identify what has got easier in a work setting and what has got harder. So some of the things that have got easier might be those meetings. I'll give you an example, something that's got easier. My husband is an accountant and it's tax planning time of year for all of his clients, right? They've done their personal tax, that's all finished, it's tax planning time. All of his clients would have come in to see him over the next 6 weeks or so. They would have all come into his office in Wimbledon. And what that would have meant for them and the impact on their day would be quite a faff, right? And it would be exactly the same for him. He is going to have Zoom meetings with all of those clients over the next 6 weeks. And the ease of having those meetings, sharing the screens, getting the documents up on Teams, scribbling all over them is brilliant. Some things have definitely got easier. But what has got harder, and I think it's, if you haven't considered this already, it's so important to think about what's got harder. Now, again, looking back at the Microsoft report, some of the things that have got harder are building relationships, right? Because we are not able to go out and have a drink with that person after work or have lunch with that person. We're doing really well at building those relationships on Teams and virtually, I know that, but it's not as easy as it was when we were together in the office. Other things that have got harder are thinking big and decision making, right? The ability as a group to do some fantastic, innovative, creative thinking about things or strategic planning and decision making has got harder. It's really proven to have got harder. So again, what can we do about that? And the first thing we have to do is understand that it's got harder and then think about how we can actually do something about it. So once we've done those first 3 steps to really think about what the reality is, we can then start to build our action plan. And the way that I've laid this out is to think about what are those long-term actions? What does all of that piece of work that I'm encouraging you to do tell you about what you've learned and what can you apply to the new normal as and when we know what that looks like? So once we're back in the office, once we're back at, working in maybe more of a hybrid way, whatever that might look like, how can we apply what we've learned in the very long term? How is it going to impact that long-term thinking? The other thing we need to think about is that medium-term things. What things, what goals, what actions have we got that need some bit by bit work, right? Do we need to work at a little bit each week, a little bit each month? So relationship building, making sure that our teams feel supported, all of those kind of things. And then the last one here to think about is that short-term plans. What can we do now, today? What can we do to make sure that we are feeling as well, as fit, as resilient, as strong as we possibly can be, to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to be doing? So is it as simple as putting an hour in your diary every single day for physical exercise? Is it important to actually fake a commute at 5:30 or whatever it is, that you can actually go and just do that? Give yourself half an hour to switch between work mode and home mode. It's going to be different for everybody, but what are those short-term things that we can do to help ourselves and our teams today? So that's what I think we need to have a bit of a think about in terms of our mental health strategy. And in the breakout areas in a moment, I'm going to ask you all to have a chat with the people that you get grouped up with, to challenge each other on these areas. Before we go into breakout areas, though, we've got two more things to have a little look at. The first one is etiquette. So the best question in the world ever, right? What is in your room 101 at the moment? And stick these in the chat, please. And we'd love to see a really long list of things. What is in your room 101 when it comes to virtual working and etiquette? What is driving you absolutely nuts? Now, this is a really important thing to have a look at, because actually somebody might put something in the list here that you do all the time, and that might be really helpful for you to realize that it's annoying somebody. That might be a really good thing. But let's have a think about etiquette. Let's have a think about what drives us absolutely bananas, and maybe Richard could shout out some of those for us as and when they come in.
People forgetting to put mute on. I was just on mute. That's a nice irony. Everything seems to take 30 minutes Teams call minimum. That's true. I like that one from Joss. That's a good one, actually. Gone are the sort of quick 5-minute chats. People turning up late for Teams calls. That means you're overrunning all day, talking over each other. Teams, not trams, fair enough. Not putting hands up and generally talking over one another. Yeah, exactly. That's come up twice already. People feeling very distracted, not being engaged in the virtual meeting, or hiding calls, eating on calls. Yeah, people scheduling meetings super early or late that they would never do in the office. That's a good one, Deborah.
Absolutely brilliant. So some things that I would absolutely expect to have seen here, because they're things that annoy me as well. There's some things that are quite personal to us all as well coming in there. All of these things help us think, right, what can we do about these, right? So etiquette is there to shape the way that we do things. I've got a couple of points here just to talk about. Let me just flick onto the next slide. What etiquette actually is. I posed a question here because I wonder actually if etiquette is one of the things that makes us human. If I had to do one of those Radio 2 essays where they do these spoken essays on what makes us human, I might actually go for etiquette and say that I think etiquette is one of the things that makes us human. I love this definition here that I found about etiquette, that it is complex. It's a set of rules. It's always evolving. And let's remember that if we're brand new into this virtual working in terms of human existence, we are, right? It's a year, that's nothing. We're learning this etiquette all of the time, and etiquette does take time to evolve. It helps us show respect and consideration to others. I think that's a really nice way of remembering what etiquette is and why it's there. And it's a good combination of manners, common sense, consideration, and all of those things. So my point here, the question that you're going to have to consider in the breakout rooms is, what etiquette needs defining within your teams? What things are driving you nuts, or that are annoying people, or are stopping really good working practices from happening, that actually you and your team need a bit more clarity on? So what can you encourage a bit more clarity around etiquette on? I put some of my thoughts here in terms of remote working etiquette. I said greetings. It's if you're in a small enough meeting that you can greet everybody, we should do it. It takes like a second. Thinking about how we greet people, how we introduce people to other people. What do we need to do in a Teams meeting or in a virtual work setting to show that we're paying attention? So important, isn't it? What can we actually do to show each other that we're paying attention? How do we respect others' time? How do we respect each other's time? I think that's one of the ones that's come up a few times in the chat. Clarity. There is no such thing as too much clarity when it comes to etiquette and manners. So take that to heart. And then the other point I think that was made about these half-an-hour meetings and everything, you can change the amount of time that a meeting is set for, right? You can absolutely define that to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you need it to be. But actually, have we got some good etiquette within our teams around check-ins? Is it acceptable for you to ring each other on a video conference whenever you want to? Is there kind of an open door policy when we're working virtually? All these things to consider, I think, would come under the heading of etiquette, and it's really worth thinking about. So there's just some of my thoughts on the matter. Have you had a chat with your team about how you want the etiquette of virtual working to work? And if not, then do. And it'd be really interesting to see what other people think about that too. So, oh no, look, my G has fallen onto the next line. Apologies, I don't know why. The typo there. I just wanted us to have a think about recognising distress. This is our last point before we go into breakout rooms. Recognising distress in others is really, really hard virtually. I've put some examples up here of all the things that you could actually recognise in others if they were in distress, if they were in some form of mental health distress. So it might be things like alcohol or drugs misuse. How on earth would you spot that virtually? Extremes of emotion. You might, all of these things might be incredibly easy for somebody to hide, or to at least keep on top of for half an hour in a team meeting or something like that. So the point that I'm making with recognising distress is that we have to work a hell of a lot harder at the moment in terms of recognising distress. And the bottom point that I've put in bold here is absolutely key. Change in the person is key. So if you are worried about somebody, if you think that there is some form of distress or anxiety or stress or depression or anything going on with somebody, if you've got a gut feel that somebody is not feeling great, if you notice some sort of change in somebody, let's ask that person, really do the whole ask twice thing. Ask that person how they are. Holding a mirror up to somebody and saying to them, I've noticed that you've seemed a bit quieter, or these kind of things can be incredibly helpful for people to realize that they themselves are in distress, and give them that platform to actually tell you how they're feeling. So I'm encouraging us to think about how difficult it is to recognise distress, the fact that we've got to work harder to do it. Changing the person is key, and to be brave and ask others how they're feeling. Now, this might also apply to ourselves, right? We might be looking at these things and saying, actually, do you know what? I'm working too much. I'm really, really struggling with things at the moment. I haven't had a weekend for 3 weeks, and I'm really not doing very well on that. So if this triggers you to have a think about how you're feeling and your own levels of distress, then again, please do the super brave thing of opening up to somebody, saying to somebody, goodness me, I am just really finding things too much at the moment, and recognise that distress in yourself as well. So as I say, you will get all of these slides, and please feel free to share them, but recognising distress in others is really important, as is recognising distress in ourselves. Does anyone have any questions on that one before we put you into your breakout rooms?